Hello dear viewers, welcome back to another machine I found while browsing through the depths of eBay. Every now and then I browse eBay to kill some time. I sometimes stumble over some obscure machine I've never heard anything about, and no one else has either. It's usually a cheap buy. Sometimes the things that arrive are actually pretty cool synths, and quite a few of these have already appeared on this channel. Today's synth is one of these rare finds, the Use Audio Plugiator. The Plugiator is not too dissimilar to the Waldorf Rack Attack that I've also featured on this channel, a synth plugin turned hardware synth. Only that it's not just one VST like the Rack Attack, but a whole bunch of plugins crammed into one sturdy metal box. Technically speaking, it's also not a bunch of VST plugins, but software synths that themselves rely on custom hardware, namely a bunch of DSP chips that would usually be installed on an extension card on your PC. So before we even start to look at the Plugiator and its plug out, so to speak, synths, I guess it makes sense to look at the history of what came before, and in an interesting plot twist, even after the Plugiator. Back in the old days, by which I mean the early to mid 90s, PCs often weren't quite up to the task of professional grade real-time audio editing. So this became a viable market for a certain Frank Hund, who founded a company called Creamware in 1992. Creamware specialized in the production of DSP-based sound cards and software that allowed real-time professional-grade audio editing by handing down the processing workload to sharp DSP chips. These DSPs are custom processors built around the idea of a very limited set of operations that the chips can process super quickly. Creamware's custom sound cards turned run-of-the-mill office PCs into powerful audio workstations. Later, they also built more powerful pro gear that was popular with radio broadcasters and other audio professionals of the day. The same DSP technology was later used to create the Noah, a standalone expander hardware that made Creamware's plugins independent from PCs running Creamware's hard-end software, and so could be used with any audio setup through MIDI. The Noah itself was followed up by a number of dedicated hardware synths that only offered one of the multiple soft synths from the Noah platform each, but it added dedicated hardware that came with a lot more direct controls and some authentic looks. Creamware itself went through recurring financial trouble during its time, but the technology it had created lives on to this day, with parts of Creamware's IP merged into multiple companies, and even Frank Hund himself starting a new company later, that still uses some of the tech. Funny enough, this new company, Make Pro Audio, released a DIY synth kit that essentially is a recreation of the Plugiator. It even runs the exact same plugins. Okay, now, enough about history. Let's talk about the Plugiator, starting with the actual hardware. The first thing that surprised me when I unpacked the Plugiator was how massive it was. The unit comes in a super sturdy metal case and is pretty heavy too. Front and center, there's a matrix-style control section that gives you direct access to a number of predetermined controls per plugin, as well as an indication of what plugin is active at the moment. Only one plugin can be used at a time, switching between plugins takes about 3 seconds. The simple preset switch within one plugin happens instantly. On the left, there are pushable buttons for patch selection and pattern saving, for toggling through the plugins, and a master volume MIDI channel selector knob. On the right you'll find some non-pushable FX control knobs. The button consists of a row of big buttons that are used for quick access to 10 patch plugin combinations. Lastly, there's a tiny 3-segment display, and that's about it, if you use the unit without the PC editor software that is. The back comes with a number of in and outputs, phone as well as stereo line out, the single input you obviously need for the vocoder. Interestingly though, most of the other plugins can also process incoming audio. There's a USB-B port as well as MIDI in and through ports, a proper power switch and a connector for the external power adapter. To fully harness the power of the Plugiator, you'll be forced to use the editor software that was released for Mac and Windows. Version 1 of the editor relied on the long-defunct Adobe Flash, but the 2.0 Windows editor works just fine with Windows 11. Setting it up can be a bit confusing, because out of the box it only comes with controls for the 3 bundled plugins. Yes, you heard that right. All these other plugins that are right there on the faceplate were not included when you first bought the Plugiator, but had to mostly be purchased separately and installed into your machine via the editor. This approach led to a situation where today, when getting a Plugiator secondhand, you are very likely stuck with what is on the machine when you get it. The extra plugins came with some seriously powerful copy protection, because every serial number of every plugin was generated by Use Audio with the unique hardware serial number of your individual machine. You can find installation files and serials for all plugins online, but nobody has managed to reverse engineer the authentication process yet, and probably never will, so you are very likely stuck with whatever the Plugiator comes with. From what I read online, the original plugins had some bugs here and there, So it's no surprise Use Audio, at some later stage in the shelf life of the Plugiator, updated the editor as well as the plugins to version 2.0. While it's not entirely clear what updates were made in most cases, the vocoder received a major overhaul, and I found the drum synth had some more controls in the version 2 editor. But unless you are very lucky and somehow get your hands on the individual serial numbers of the plugins that come with your individual Plugiator, you won't be able to update them. To not make this video much longer than it already is, I will create a separate video where I will show you how to install and update the controls for each plugin in the editor sometime soon, as this is actually possible even without the serial numbers. Now, after what must have been the longest introduction to a synth for this channel, let's actually look at the music part of this machine. I was very lucky to pick up a Plugiator with all the plugins installed, and while they seem to be the 1.0 versions, at least they are all there, so I'm not complaining. The plugins are the following. Minimax, the first plugin that was pre-installed on all Plugiators. The Minimoog emulators, so it should be pretty clear what it does. The sound is pretty juicy, and while the Minimoog is a mono synth, there are even a few polyphonic patches for some reason. Here are some factory patches I like. B4000, the second pre-installed plugin. This is an emulation of Hammond organs, complete with Leslie speaker simulation. The sound again is pretty high quality. I prepared a few organ classics for you to check out and tried to find patches that match those sounds. Lightwave. Pre-installed synth number 3 is a 2 oscillator per voice analog style polysynth. Use Audio advertised it as a wavetable synth, but instead of proper wavetables, you just get 128 individual waveforms and no wave scanning. The sound is a pretty boring, cheap digital synth affair. I really struggled to find any nice factory patches, but was surprised that this thing can create a surprising amount of low end if you crank up the resonance all the way. Also, I will show you with the last patch I created myself, it can sound quite nice until the comically bad filters are enabled. Vocodizer, a fully blown vocoder in the 2.0 software update, was replaced with a similar plugin called Voctor. The Vocodizer was a free update when you registered a Plugiator online, so many pre-owned Plugiators should have this plugin included too. I was rather surprised about the pretty great results I got from my cheap PS2 SingStar mic. Prodyssey. This plugin is an emulation of an ARP Odyssey, and that's what it sounds like too. All kinds of nasty, the good type of nasty that is. Pro 12. Now this is something special, an emulation of an analog legend, the super-powered Prophet 5 known as the Prophet 12. Again, lots of great sounding patches. FMagica, whatever. This is an emulation of a 4-operator FM synth. 4 OP synths, like the Yamaha DX11, were the budget go-to digital synths of the late 80s and early 90s. After the Lightwave being such a disappointment, I didn't really expect much, but this thing really sounds pretty sweet and polished. Drums and bass. The name is pretty telling here. The drum synth plus mono synth plugin. The mono synth part isn't very exciting, to put it politely. The drum part has 11 individual drum sounds and offers a few interesting patches. All in all, many of the drum sounds sadly lack both punch and character, but some of the drum kits sound unique enough. Here are some of my favorites. As I always try to do for every video, let's end this video with a little demo track utilizing all plugins in one song via the magic of multi-track recording. This time it took me forever to come up with a demo track, because the selection of interesting sounds was a bit overwhelming. Okay, and that's it for today's video. I hope I could give you a good idea of what the Plugiator is about. While you could easily write it off as a big old preset box that, if you're unlucky, comes with less than half the presets, the sounds you can theoretically get out of this thing are very varied. If your box comes with other plugins, that is. And even more so if you are willing to use the editor. So if you plan on actually getting one of yourself, try to make sure to get one with all the plugins installed. And if you happen to stumble upon one that comes with all the plugin keys for your machine, count yourself a very lucky man. I would have said woman too, but statistics show that this channel is a boys only affair. So see you soon with another synth, and maybe one day a female subscriber too.